So today I'll be talking about and driving the Dodge Viper. The Dodge Viper is arguably one of their best discontinued cars. No, it's not a muscle car like their other more popular cars, but it was one of the few cars that was sporty, since it's a sports car, not a muscle car like the Challengers or Chargers are. Of course, there are the classic Chargers, but it's my favorite model in terms of newer cars. Before I get into the model I'm using in the video, which is a 2013 Dodge Viper GTS, I would like to go over a brief history of the car. Personally, I really like the history of the Viper. I think it's awfully interesting. While I talk about this, I'll have a lap of Nürburgring play in the background again. To begin, the idea of the Viper came from Chrysler's president at the time, Robert A. Lutz. He gave the idea to Tom Gale. The idea was to create a sports car reminiscent of the Shelby Cobra and Jaguar E-Type. He not only wanted the looks to be amazing, but he also wanted it to be powerful and different from other cars on the market at the time. In order to do so, they got assistance from Lamborghini in designing the engine. The main thing that they did was change Chrysler's LAV8 from iron to aluminum and add 2 additional cylinders. At first, Dodge only produced 2 Vipers to serve as the pace cars for the Indianapolis in 1991. Soon in 1992, Dodge finally started production, and the first generation of Vipers began being produced, sold, and driven on the road. The first generation lasted from 1992 up until 1995. The second generation was 1996 to 2002. The third generation was 2003 to 2007. The fourth generation was 2008 to 2010. The final generation, Gen 5, lasted from 2013 to 2017. Dodge discontinued the Viper due to its declining sales numbers, and in order to meet safety regulations, the Viper would need a lot of redesigning. Today I'll be focusing on the last generation of the Viper because it is obviously going to be the best, and like always I'll briefly cover the exterior of the Viper. One of the most recognizable features about the car is the long hood. The Dodge Viper needs the front end to be really long in order to fit the car's 8.4 liter V10. In the front of the hood there's a hole in order to let enough air so the engine can work at its maximum potential and not overheat. The car is naturally aspirated, so the air goes straight to the engine. If someone were to turbo or supercharge the Viper, it could easily make far more power. In order to help the engine cool off, there are vents in the back of the front fenders that let out hot air. The excess air then runs along the side of the car and around the rear fenders in order to help reduce drag. The rest of the body is nothing too special. It is a long hood that eventually meets the driver's cabin. The windshield curves up to the roof and then to the back where there is a little duckbill spoiler. I would like to bring up, however, the Dodge Viper ACR. I do not have it. In the video I'm showing the Dodge Viper GTS, which is the mid-tier car when compared to the other 2 versions of the Viper. The ACR has a few changes that vastly increase the performance and handling. It has vents coming out of the top of the hood to get out the hot air that the fenders don't get out. Not only that, but it has a front split on the bumper and diffuser on the rear bumper. Finally, on the rear end, there's a big carbon fiber wing to keep the car on the ground throughout the track. Moving on from the exterior to interior, it is nothing particularly special or extravagant, even for its price point. The best thing about the interior of the Viper is that when getting into one, you never have to worry about being left with an automatic transmission. This is because all of the Vipers produced only came with a 6-speed manual transmission. They were only fitted with a manual transmission because the Viper was targeted towards car enthusiasts, most of which preferred a manual transmission over automatic. Behind it and a bit to the right you will find the handbrake. The screen features Bluetooth, radio, and a navigation system. Something else to note about the last generation is that it has push to start and remote start. The steering wheel is nothing too special either. It has a leather wheel and buttons for the typical wheel controls. The seats are made of leather. According to drivers, however, it is not the most comfortable. So now we're done with the looks of the car. Before I get into how I felt about the driving aspects of the car, I would like to talk about the specs. There are 3 main trim levels for the Dodge Viper. The primary difference is what they are fitted with. The GTS is the lowest trim model, the SRT is next up, and finally you have the ACR. They all have an 8.4 liter V10 that makes 645 horsepower and 600 foot-pounds of torque. After posting a short review about the Viper, a viewer made a good point in the comments. They brought up that the Viper has a massive engine, an 8.4 liter V10, but only makes 645 horsepower. Obviously that seems like an unreasonable amount of power for that size. As they said, it seemed like lazy engineering. To many people, they may think, ooh, big engine number means big horsepower. And when they see a smaller engine or less horsepower, the first thing that they assume is that the car is slower and weaker. While yes, this can be true, this is not always the case. When going for power in a car, manufacturers seem to have 2 options when making the engine. One way that most people think is, ooh, small engine, but big horsepower. This thing is high-tech. For example, BMW's M3 has a 3-liter inline-6 engine that makes 473 horsepower. This therefore seems impressive due to its smaller size and large power and speed outputs. The thing is, however, that they make less torque when compared to a larger engine. Because the engine isn't as big, when the crankshaft is spinning, there's less weight and it can then spin faster. This faster rotation helps the car to produce more horsepower. When looking at a car, they don't typically list the torque of the engine, so it can be easily overlooked. The other way that cars can produce power like in the Dodge Viper is by creating more torque. The engine is bigger and heavier, so it makes more torque that gives it the power to compete with other sports cars. I guess in his mind, he hadn't thought of the other factors that play into a car's power output. The Viper is a perfect example of how bigger engines can compete with other sports cars despite having a seemingly weaker engine. Whenever you see a Viper on the road, remember they have the most track records in comparison to any other production car at this time. Of course, there are other factors that can play into a car's performance. Such factors include weight, aerodynamics, and much more. If you all would want to see a video where I cover the factors that contribute to a vehicle's power, let me know in the comments and I will look into making a video about that. The thing that sets the trims apart is the body. The GTS is the lowest trim with it only having 2 hood vents and a tiny duckbill spoiler on the back. When you move up to the SRT, it weighs less than the GTS and has 6 hood vents instead of 2. Finally, the ACR cranks it up with parts as mentioned before. They have splitters, diffuser, a large spoiler, and something you failed to mention earlier was the carbon ceramic brakes. Not only that, but it weighs less than the SRT even if it's not by much. Now, I'll cover the 0 to 60 times and do the 60 to 0 times once I hit 60. After that, I'll do a quick top speed test. The first test started at 10.216 seconds and ended at 14.316 seconds for the 0 to 60, making the time 4.1 seconds. I hit the brakes at 40.4 seconds and reached 0 at 42.683 seconds, making the time 2.3 seconds. The second test started at 44.633 seconds and ended at 48.783 seconds for the 0 to 60, making the time 4.2 seconds. I hit the brakes at 1 minute and 13.633 seconds and reached 0 at 1 minute 16.066 seconds, making the time 2.4 seconds. The third test started at 1 minute and 18.416 seconds and ended at 1 minute and 22.55 seconds for the 0 to 60, making the time 4.1 seconds. I hit the brakes at 1 minute and 46.116 seconds and reached 0 at 1 minute and 48.466 seconds, making the time 2.3 seconds. In the end, the Viper is very consistent with its times. The 0 to 60 times average out to 4.1 seconds and the 60 to 0 times average out to 2.3 seconds. Now onto the top speed and acceleration test. I reached the Viper's top speed in just over a minute from 0 miles an hour. The Viper seemed to cap out at 219 miles an hour. I'll go ahead and allow you to listen to the engine as the car accelerates. If you'd like to skip ahead, use the timestamp on screen. Now let's finish up the lap of the Nürburgring and move on to the rest of the tracks. So now we're going back to the Nürburgring with the Dodge Viper. If you caught it, at one point during the track it was just that one time in this whole entire lap where I went into the grass because I just took the turn too sharply, didn't quite have my control, and I got in the grass. But it didn't quite ruin the lap. I had a pretty good time, I think. I'm not the most experienced driver, no professional driver, but I'd say like my lap time with the Dodge Viper GTS was pretty good. The car is pretty good. It's just a lot of the times I forget how heavy the car is. The car is around 3,500 pounds. It's pretty heavy, but the car's rather small. It doesn't feel that heavy. It feels pretty light when you're going down the track. Has really good acceleration and pretty good braking. But I just forget how heavy the car is. So when I come up to some of those big old turns, or like some of the really sharp turns, I forget how heavy the car is. So I forget to brake as soon, or I don't brake hard enough, and I end up just going right through the edge of the track into a wall, or I don't turn sharp enough, and that causes the lap to like get a little messed up. During the entire Nürburgring lap though is pretty good. Going down the straight felt really nice because you could just really feel that speed going through here. It was just about perfect, honestly. Driving the Dodge Viper is like, I've always thought about getting the car at some point in my life because it's a really nice car, really fast, really popular, sporty, American. It's just amazing. But they're just so expensive. But driving the car in the game, it just makes me like, I want it so much more than I really thought I ever would. Like, I know a lot of people that love this car because it's just, there's no reason not to like it. It's everything you could want in an enthusiast car. That's what I think from driving on the Nürburgring. Even with all the mishaps on the track, it was still really fun. Now we're moving on to the French track known as Alsace. I haven't had much experience with this track, except for a couple times on the career mode of this game. Other than that, this is my first time really driving on the track. Starting out, after you cross the finish line, you come up to a decently long straight. This straight takes you to a longer curve that I never quite expected on any of my laps. Each time I ended up having to brake rather hard, but the car is pretty forgiving and it can turn pretty well and accelerate really fast. Come up to these next few turns, the car is able to go around them pretty quickly. You didn't have to brake too hard. On some of them you did have to, because you have to remember the car is like 3,500 pounds. Regardless, the car is still fast. Right up here is a bit of a sharper turn, so I had to brake a little bit more. But like every other time, the car was really fast accelerating down the turn, so it really helped with like making up the lost time on those corners. The straights are really where this car is the most powerful. Even with the most current of the Dodge cars, they're really good at making cars go fast in a straight line. And the Dodge Viper is no exception. It's just that the Dodge Viper has, in my opinion, much better handling than any of their other muscle cars. Because something about muscle cars that I've noticed is that they're not that good at turning. Their whole thing is straight line speed, while sports cars actually have good handling in turns and braking and all that. Like, as you've seen coming up to the end of this track, it can brake really fast, really well. And also in the brake test, it has pretty good brakes. Now coming at the end of the track, there's some tighter turns like this one right here. This one's rather tight, but the car is really good at braking, so it allows me to be able to brake as soon before I hit the wall and go through the rest of the turns and get to the end of the track. Next up is one of my favorite tracks, also known as Monza. This track is a rather short track when compared to the others, and that's why I really love it. It's a really short track, you can take it really fast, plenty of straights, but also plenty of turns. The first curve around this track, it really shows how well the car can accelerate out of these turns. You come onto this next straight, and compared to other cars on this track, you have to brake a lot earlier. Because otherwise, if you don't brake quite soon enough, you're going to go straight into that other barrier, and you're going to miss this little turn, and you're going to have to get a penalty. It takes the chicane really well, in my opinion. compared to other cars, it is really smooth so far. Everything about this car and this track is just amazing. Going down this little straight, you get really good. You get really fast, and you get to brake pretty quick, just enough to get around this next part, and you get up to speed again. Following this, you got some of the sharper turns, not super sharp, not this one specifically. It's one of the next ones. This one's a little sharp. You do have to decelerate a good bit. You do lose quite a bit of speed, but as with every other track, you accelerate really fast, and that makes up for a lot of the time. Now, how will this car pit against other cars on this track? I'd say it could hold its ground pretty well. Will it win? Maybe not. I have yet to test that, but if you would want me to, I could test that in a future video. Regardless, after that, you're coming down the straight, and then you come into some S's. Takes these S's really well. You can take them pretty quickly. You obviously want to slow down so you don't like fly into a barrier, but it can take them really well. After that, you're on to one of the last straights, which comes up to that same starting turn that we had at the very beginning of this lap. You have to brake a decent bit, but you can still take this turn really fast, pretty quick, and it's really nice. Overall, this car and this track, it's amazing. I absolutely love the Viper, especially Monza. Just amazing. Now we move on to my second, maybe even first favorite track, Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Before I get into talking about the track, I'd like to bring up something someone in the comments said in the short video I made. From Nate_ESL, they said the Dodge Viper GTS was also used as a test mule for the development of the Mercedes SLS AMG. I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's a pretty neat fact. I didn't know that when I was writing the script for this video, or when I was writing the script for the short video. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's a pretty neat little fact I want to share with everyone else that's watching this video. And thank you to Nate if you're watching this. And now we can get into the actual track of this video. The first little turns were pretty easy, pretty nice, and right up here is where things start to get a little serious. They're a little bit more intense because it's like you want to go fast, but you can't really go too fast because once you get too fast, you're not gonna have time to brake enough for these turns before you get into the gravel. Like right here, I almost broke too late and got into that gravel. If I would have just broken a little bit too later, or not fast enough, then I would have been off the track, and that would not have been good. It would have taken up a lot of time of the lap, not really showing how well this car can actually drive. Coming at this turn, like all these turns, you can really hear this tire squeaking. That's something I did notice a lot. I'm not sure what I was doing wrong. I feel like I might have been taking the turns a little bit too sharply and too quick, and that can certainly be improved by just being a better driver. And eventually with time I will get it, I will get better. But during my time driving the Dodge Viper, that is what I experienced. Is it bad? No, because just because the tire firm doesn't mean anything. Not really. The car still handles impeccably. Accelerating on those corners, it is very nice. It accelerates really well, gets up to speed really quick. It just really shows how powerful the car really is. So far, this has been one of my favorite cars I've driven in the game. And I've driven a bunch of cars. I've driven some of the Lamborghinis and Audi R8, many of the Porsches, BMWs. I've even had the opportunity to drive a Bugatti. And this is up there with some of my favorite cars. Some of my favorite cars are like, I have the Audi R8 and Porsche 911. Those are some of my favorite cars in this game. And the Dodge Viper is up there with them, in my opinion. But yeah, that was the end of the track, and overall, the car did really well.